My uncle brought his mentee to Christmas Eve, and my grandfather dropped his glass. My Uncle Robert had been mentoring troubled youth for about a decade, so nobody thought twice when he said he was bringing someone to Christmas dinner. A young man from the program, he explained. Brilliant kid, rough childhood, nowhere to go for the holidays. My grandmother immediately started setting an extra place at the table, but when they walked through the door, my grandfather took one look at the young man's face, and his wine glass slipped from his fingers, shattering across the hardwood floor. Everyone froze. My grandfather just stood there, pale as death, staring at this stranger like he'd seen a corpse walk into his living room. The young man introduced himself as Elijah. He was polished, well-spoken, maybe 24 or 25 years old. He shook hands with everyone and complimented my grandmother's decorations. But I noticed he kept glancing at the family photos on the mantel, his eyes lingering on certain faces. My grandfather refused to come back to the living room. He stayed in the kitchen, drinking whiskey and muttering to my grandmother about headaches. Uncle Robert seemed confused but brushed it off. Dad's been stressed lately, he told Elijah. Don't take it personally. Elijah smiled and said he understood completely. Something about that smile made the hair on my neck stand up. It was patient, knowing, like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. Dinner started without incident. My grandfather finally joined us, sitting as far from Elijah as possible. The conversation flowed normally until my aunt asked Elijah about his background. He said he'd grown up in foster care, bounced around a lot, never knew his real parents. My grandmother made a sympathetic noise. That must have been so difficult. Elijah nodded slowly. It was, especially when I found out my mother didn't give me up because she was poor or young. He paused, looking directly at my grandfather. She gave me up because someone paid her to disappear. The table went silent. My grandfather's fork clattered against his plate. My grandmother touched her chest like she was having trouble breathing. Uncle Robert looked between them, completely lost. Dad, what's he talking about? My grandfather tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He gripped the edge of the table and told Elijah to leave immediately. Elijah didn't move. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed us a photograph. It was a check from 1999, made out to a woman named Diane Foster for $50,000. The memo line read, relocation expenses. The signature at the bottom was my grandfather's. I found my birth mother last year, Elijah said calmly. She told me everything. How she got pregnant by your son William when she was 19. How you told her your family couldn't afford the scandal of your golden boy having a baby with a waitress. How you wrote this check and told her that if she ever came back or contacted anyone, you'd destroy her. My Uncle William wasn't at dinner that year. He died in a car accident when I was 12. I never knew he'd left anyone behind. My grandmother started sobbing. She swore she didn't know, that my grandfather had handled everything. My grandfather finally found his voice and started shouting that Elijah was lying, that this was extortion, that he'd call the police. But Elijah just sat there, impossibly calm, watching the man who'd erased him scream himself hoarse. I'm not here for money, Elijah said quietly. I'm here because your son Robert found me in that mentorship program. He's been teaching me about family, about belonging, about what it means to have people who care about you. He turned to look at Uncle Robert, who had tears streaming down his face. He didn't know who I was. He just saw a kid who needed help. That's the difference between you and him. He looked back at my grandfather. I wanted you to see what you threw away, and I wanted you to know that I became everything you were afraid I'd be. Successful, educated, part of this family whether you like it or not. My grandfather had a stroke 3 months later, and Elijah was the one who drove him to the hospital.